everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Tasneem Abrahams. I'm the founder of the Private Practice Growth Club. And on this channel, we share tips, tools, and tutorials for health professionals starting and growing private practices in South Africa. As you know, I like to feature private practitioners who I see are doing amazing work and who I feel that you as the audience can learn from. And so today, I have not one, but two occupational therapists, Fiona and Kirsten, from Beukes and Reynders occupational therapists. And they are actually in the vocational rehabilitation space. So I'm really excited to have them on board because they're my first in that kind of niche. So I'm sure we can learn a lot from them. So welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So this is the first time I'm interviewing two people, so it's going to be nice, quite interesting. So first of all, maybe can each of you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Who are you, and why did you become an occupational therapist?
Okay, I'll go first. So I have wanted to be an occupational therapist since I was 13. So it was one of those where I never questioned it. I had a disability group come to our school and an OT led it, and I always wanted to help people, and so I thought nursing was the way to go. And when I saw the occupational therapy option, I definitely thought that was what was meant for me. And yeah, I haven't looked back. I've been in a few different fields and have loved every different aspect that OT brings.
Amazing. And where did you graduate? Which university did you study?
I studied at Wits and graduated in 1996. So it feels a long time ago. And yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And yourself, Kirsten?
So I am the opposite. I didn't actually really know what OT was, but I've had back issues since I was quite young. And my physio said, well, why don't you come be a physio? And then my science and my maths let me down, and I'd happened to apply for OT as a backup. And so here we are. And I think it's absolutely the best thing that could have happened for me. I think our field is just so diverse. And I have, since I graduated, I only graduated in 2017, but I have dabbled as much as I can everywhere, worked quite a lot in neuro and in psych, and from after concert, I've been in Voc and Medico-legal. And so, yeah, absolutely love what I've ended up doing. I've tried to touch hands on every part that I can.
I love what you said about the best thing that could have happened to you, because it reminds me of a snippet I saw of, Lisa Kudrow from Friends, the character in Friends. So she as the person, the actress, was doing like a graduation speech, and she was talking about how she used to go for auditions, and then every time she gets turned down, and then I can't remember what it was she was turned down for, which is quite a big role. But then she ended up getting Friends, and she was saying that every no was actually meant to be so that it could take her to where she was meant to be, where she was meant to be in Friends. And I don't think anybody else could have done the character the way she did. So it's so true. It's like sometimes doors close for you, but it's because it's you're meant to go into, it's meant to open a different or take you down a different path. And it's just about how you seize that opportunity. So, and now we gained and now we gained another OT to our profession. And I'm always like, come to OT, become an OT. So that's fantastic. So, Fiona, you said that you've practiced in many different areas, and Kirsten, you said you've always kind of been, although you've done neuro, and that you've always been in sort of the Voc Rehab kind of space. So let's talk about that a little, because I think because occupational therapy is such a broad profession, you can work in so many different areas. I think a lot of people find, especially I think I was at the first community service year. So Fiona, you probably didn't have to do community service, but Kirsten, you will know that.
I think I just missed it.
Yeah, and I think for those who have been from the community service, it's almost like community service is the thing that starts you off in a certain direction, and then if you want to go in a different direction, you kind of have to intentionally do courses and things to take a different route. I don't know if that's different when you didn't have to do community service, because you could then maybe look for a job in a specific area that you think you might be interested in. But I find that occupational therapists really struggle with the thing about, especially when you're starting out, where do I actually want to be? Where do I belong? So maybe take us through the different journeys between you, Fiona, who worked in different settings, versus you, Kirsten, who kind of stuck with a similar kind of area. Starting with you, Fiona, tell us about the different areas you work in. How did that lead you up to where you are now working in the Voc Rehab space?
So I was always quite clear that I wanted to be in peds right throughout my entire studying everything. Even when I worked at Natalspruit Hospital, I was adamant I was going to be in the peds unit, and we had to swap around. And when we had to swap, I swapped out of the hospital because I was like, I didn't want to do anything else. I only wanted to do peds. And I think it was just like, it was just that was always my interest. And then went into peds, had my own private practice in peds for a while, and but then had my own kids. And I think that was the big changing point for me, because I just felt I was giving to other people's kids all day. To give to my own was hard. So I needed to break away from the peds. So I did SI, I did all of that, and really enjoyed it. So I feel like every change that I've made, I haven't regretted anything. Like everything's kind of sort of built on the thing before. And then went into an NGO and worked in training. So I trained the care workers in homes, I kept ECD workers, and actually probably loved that the most, in all honesty. So really, really enjoyed that. And then, it just came time to leave. It was just the timing was getting a little bit tricky with managing my own children. And so I needed something that was part-time, but I felt like I needed a new challenge. And so always been interested in the vocational rehab space. But like I said, had been a little bit one-track minded about peds. So I think my mind was just opening up to the Voc rehab space. It was always kind of my second sort of interest. And then ended up we both started working for a lady called Megan Hales, and predominantly doing medico-legal, and actually really enjoyed it. So the reports are long and hard, but really enjoyed learning something new, learning a new field, went on a whole lot of courses, and kind of have stuck with that ever since. So, enjoyed the other aspects of my OT career, but enjoying where I am today as well.
So I actually remember that time because, our kids were at school together, and I actually remember the time when you went to do a course that would enable. It was the FCE training, wasn't it?
It was the Ergoscience, yeah.
Yes, and I remember we had a chat about it out in the parking lot, as moms do, and you were talking about how you were making the switch, and I remember thinking that's such I'm a bit of a chameleon OT, but never made such a dramatic switch from I find the switch to medico-legal and Voc Rehab a bit scary. So tell me a bit about that. What was it like? Because peds is so very different, and even training caregivers and that, it's different. And I think what I find intimidating about the medico-legal space is because you also interact with these corporate types, and corporate people kind of scare me. So talk to me a bit about that. What was it like making the transition, and what helped you make it a smooth transition?
So I really, I think Megan, in all honesty, the person we work for, she has an amazing people personality and amazing supportive personality. So I think it was also just graded. So it was scary. I won't lie. And it's still a bit scary because if I look back at all my experience, then I go, oh, am I actually, I don't have experience in this. So it is scary. But at the same time, the support that we had, it was a gradual introduction into it. So I think I started just writing reports and getting familiar with reports. Then it was lots of observation of assessments, lots of feedback, lots of observation, and then doing courses. So I think just doing the courses and getting your sort of teeth sunk into the area of speciality is great, because it just gives you that confidence that you need. So we also run something called Wikipedia, which is a CPD course, and I learned a lot from the Wikipedia, and like I say, from all the courses. So it definitely has been scary, and like there are days where you're like, am I too old to be doing this? But but I do like I've liked the challenge. I think the brain challenge, and just to split brain cells into something a little bit different, learn something completely new, has been scary but great, and I think rewarding. Like I can do this. Like there's a positive reward to it. So I've like you say, it's not always easy, but and especially making that first leap. But I think because it was a gradual leap, it wasn't like I was jumping straight into the fire. There was build up, graded return.
and also so what I'm hearing you say was like, building up the skill gives you the confidence, but then you also had somebody who was ahead of you in terms of experience and steps that was supportive of you. So it would have maybe been a lot harder if you didn't have that person to like.
Absolutely. And we still use her. We still use her for support. So if I'm not sure about a case, I'll give her a call. She'll check through reports for me if she's got the time. Like, so we're still using that support. Which has been great.
Amazing. Okay, so over to you, Kirsten. So what was your journey like?
So I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that ComServe kind of forces you to think about, well, what do I want to do? And I was in a rural area in the Free State for my ComServe, and kind of looked at a lot of the areas and was like, I don't know if I'm going to do any of this. Especially a lot of the PED stuff really wasn't my thing. And so I Googled, and I was like, I really don't know a lot about what this medico-legal Voc rehab. I was also in the time before. And so I Googled towards the end of my ComServe and phoned Megan and said, I Googled and found Voc OT practices. And I phoned Megan and said, would you mind if I just come through and see what you do? And I ended up working for Megan from first year out of ComServe. So I think, similar to Fiona, I think I was heavily reliant on Megan's support and Megan's experience. I have the opposite thought to feel a lot of the time. Am I too young to be doing this? It feels like we make some very big decisions, and I wonder if, being arrogant sometimes, making these decisions with little experience. And I think that's really where the support comes in. And I think also just, from the start, I kind of felt like I did need experience in other clinical fields in order to make the decisions I was making. So as much as Megan was helping me with the Voc stuff and the decisions and the big decisions, throughout my career, I've locumed as a clinician as well. And so I think that's really where I got my physical, my neuro, my psych experience, and just absorbed like a sponge. And with each case, came back then and brought that experience into the Voc field. And I think I'm so grateful for those experiences and the way my career has gone, because I'm incredibly passionate about it, looking at things holistically. It's in Voc, this person is not, it's not a hand fracture. It's, it's not just a head injury. We are dealing with a whole person, an employer, an insurance industry. We're dealing with so much. And so I'm really, really grateful for the little tidbits of clinical experience that I've then brought home into my passion for Voc.
But now we're talking about the clinical aspect of changing from PEDS to Voc Rehab, or, upskilling yourself in an area that isn't really gone into depth in your undergrad studies. But now you've gone and started your own practice, which is a whole other thing altogether, right? Because it's one thing to go and work for somebody and they're giving you support, and even though you're still using it now at the moment, tell me a little bit about that decision to go on your own and start your own practice. When was that, and how did you come to that decision?
So we kind of felt like our hand was forced. It was like the next step in the process. So COVID hit and hit our practice quite hard because of the road accident fund being even more of a disaster than it usually is. And so we were already starting to diversify. So we realized we couldn't have all the eggs in the road accident fund basket. So we had already done a few FCEs and that type of thing for insurance companies, but we just realized the urgency of that and the need to diversify. So we spent a lot of time, so it was Kirsten, myself, and Megan. We spent a lot of time investigating the different aspects that we could do and just trying to get our name out there. So we signed up a whole lot of things. We cold called, we did all sorts of things. And just as that was we were starting to get a little bit of traction with that, Megan decided to immigrate. So that kind of left us, we looked at each other and we were like, well, either we sort of, all that work we've done, we leave it and we go and work it somewhere else or do something else, or we take the plunge and start our own business. So that's kind of how it was. Yeah. And I've always believed, like you said, even in the beginning, like everything sort of has a knock-on effect. And so it was just the next step that we took the plunge. We had a lot of support from Megan, but we wanted to start our own. We want to start things from afresh for a variety of different reasons. But essentially we bought all the stuff from Megan and took it from there. But that's how we came about. And that was 19 months ago. Yeah.
So what was when you decided, okay, you're going to start this practice, what were some of the first kind of hurdles that you encountered when you now, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to start our practice? What were some of the first hurdles you encountered?
Yeah, we had a lot. We literally, I remember Chris saying to me at one stage, Fiona, did you walk under a ladder? Because every single thing that I think also we were starting in COVID. So that was our first big issue, was starting in COVID. Even to get our company registered took so much longer than what was typical. I think just the backlog and people working from home and lockdown and everything. So that was the first big hurdle. Like every aspect of our business had a hurdle related to admin. So like our bank accounts, we open our bank accounts and then suddenly they've made a mistake somewhere and it's not verifiable. So our clients can't pay us. So lots of toing and froing with the bank. Then then we had an issue with our accountant who was actually a bit of a fraud. Oh my gosh. So we had to sort that out. Then we had even to get a cell phone contract through Vodacom, like they just don't give things like that to small businesses. So it was a fight and a battle. And so I think as small businesses, it's hard in this country to start up a new business. The red tape is just enormous. And then even to get registered with all the medical aids, even that Discovery took almost a year, I think, to get us properly registered. And I don't know if it's just COVID and people working from home and people out of routine or whatever, but everything just took a whole lot longer than what it should have. So those were the big hurdles. Obviously, then there's those ones of where we're going to get clients and keeping our name positive. So that weight of responsibility of keeping, we want to keep a good name for ourselves. So doing the very, very best that we can in all of what we do. So those were some of them. Have you got any others to add?
No, I just think like one of the biggest things was that bank account verification, because that thing, even with the on duty work we do, we couldn't register with the funders. That was one of the issues with discovery, with the medical aids, you know. So it was just, and even with companies, you know, when employers are paying us for assessments, your big companies need to verify you. And so I think that was probably one of the biggest issues, because it was an admin issue at the bank that they just couldn't figure out. And
it was just frustrating because we had done the right thing. We had followed the process. We were really mindful of doing things in the correct manner, setting things up in the most correct manner, and then it was just like blocks. So there were a lot of admin challenges.
I think that also one of the challenges that came with that, I think, is we were used to being OTs. So now already you're taking on this additional admin of being a business owner, which I'm then setting up Wi-Fi and phones and rents, and you know, it's all these things you're not used to, and so you're spending this additional admin time, but then those little hurdles then feel like the end of the world, because already you're challenging yourself so much to run a business, which we don't know how to do. We are trained as OTs.
But now on top of that, because there's also now this hurdle of starting a business, and that's not what you're trained to do. But on top of that, you've also gone into business as two people, not one. Which the pros of that, of course, is you have support and you can share the responsibilities. But it's also like it's also like can be a challenge to now, because you're navigating this new dynamic, and there's the it's like getting married basically, right? Because you're going, you're entering this relationship with somebody. So tell me some of the things you learned from, like, if there are other people out there who want to start a practice and they don't want to do it on their own, and they're considering going into practice with someone else, what are some of the advice you would give to make that transition or into that new relationship smooth?
So, I mean, Chris and I didn't know each other very well either. So I think just to, like I said, we were kind of thrown into the situation. And I think there's quite a big age gap. So and we're different in every way. So, I mean, I'm even just thinking, you wearing black, I'm wearing white. Like, that's quite like indicative of how different we are. But I think, I mean, you've said it exactly how it is. It's like a marriage. It's like a partnership. So there's going to be some bad moments, and you've just got to face them head on, communicate, talk about them, and see it as a business transaction almost. Like you almost need to see it it's the business, and for the sake of the business, and we're not going to agree on everything. Like it's that's the baseline. We won't, but that's okay, because we agree on most things. So the things that we don't agree on, then we just got to talk through them and communicate. So I think that's my biggest advice, is just keep talking and so Chris and I, like, we literally send each other probably 20 voice notes every day. Just this little thing and that little thing, and advice here and advice there. So, but I think that's so important, is just to get it always out there. Like,
We have quite different goals. We have very different financial needs. I think that's something that we both felt very grateful for when we first started working together. We were completely transparent financially. I mean, I've literally laid out my budget for me and said, like, this is my goal for the practice, and we have different goals for the practice. And that's okay. I think our differences are what make the practice work, because if we just had the same brain, then we'd go jump into mistakes together and jump into, the good stuff together. And so I think we actually almost, that dynamic of being quite different is quite good for us, but being very transparent in that. What do I want for the practice? And allowing each other the freedom, I think, within that, to meet your personal goals as well as, the overarching business goals.
Yeah, I like that. And I think the like you were saying, communication and being transparent. And I think that is something that I think maybe is probably the biggest word of advice if you're going into business with somebody, is that they need to know what your they need to know everything. They need to know, you need to be able to say, this is what my needs are. This is why this is important to me. This is why I'm making these decisions. So that if there's that transparency, it builds trust, I guess. And then you kind of know that you're making the decisions together, and not just you have your own agendas and kind of not making them sync together. So that's quite important. But I think also, so one of the things, obviously, whether you are going into business as yourself or with somebody, the first decision that needs to be made is how you're going to operate as a legal entity, right? So, you can either be a sole prop, and as together, you can then be a partnership, which is the equivalent of a sole prop, or you can register a company as yourself as an individual, as a director, or you can register a company as partners, right? So how did you make that decision? Like, what did you base that decision on how you were going to register?
We actually based it on the HPCSA guidelines.
Okay.
And going into partnerships. So we did investigate quite a lot of the options here. We don't have too many options as OTs, but the baseline is that you have to be incorporated. Just from the HPCSA, how they guide you. So we just, like I said, we wanted to do it as following the rules as closely as possible. And that is the first step. So we are both directors. We've got memorandum of understanding between us, shareholders agreement. We've got all of that sort of lawyer contract stuff in place. But yeah, the baseline is that we're an incorporated.
Yeah. So I think because a lot of people struggle with that part, because obviously there's tax implications for either whether you're a sole prop / partner or whether you're an Inc. And so because you're mentioning now the legal stuff and you had an accountant which you had to switch because of dodgy business there. So was that something that you invested in quite early on, is having like professional people do the stuff that they have expertise on?
They registered the company for us. Literally from day one, we got the help.
Yeah. I'd rather spend money on that and getting it set up correctly than down the line and we've got mistakes. So yeah. So we definitely had someone do that for us.
And now let's talk about money. So when you're starting a practice, depending on the type of practice, it's going to cost different things, right? So how did you prepare for that? Like the cost of starting up a practice. And then obviously, like you said, you need to find clients and then they can't always pay you. So there's the cash flow that you have to think about. How did you prepare for that? And then how did you, when there were hiccups and issues with cash flow and things like that, how did you navigate that?
So cash flow is an ongoing issue. That's the biggest challenge. I think Chris and I have always been in agreement that, so we obviously didn't take big salaries. In fact, it took a while for us to even take salaries. Probably a good 4 months, I would say, before we actually took a salary. And so we literally saw what was in the bank account and took salaries according to that. So just from a setup point of view, we both put money into the business. So we've split everything 50-50. And so that's how we started is by obviously buying the equipment and buying what we need, and then putting a little bit of money into the account to start with. And then, and that obviously gets allocated as a loan, and then hopefully we get that loan back as time goes on. And we've basically built up from that, bearing in mind that we always want to try and cover our costs. So before we pay ourselves a salary, we make sure that we can cover our costs. And then, it has built up a bit. So we have actually changed the structure a little bit now. We were paying each other because we were sort of 50%, equal partners. we were paying ourselves the same. I'm also a mother. So we have actually changed the structure of how that works, and it goes according to the billing of who bills what. So that's how it works. But yeah, like I said, it's literally looking every month, and we do it with the tax guy. Like we sit and figure it out. But yeah, cash flow is a massive issue, and I think in these OT practices, and like it looks good on paper, it might look good on paper when you do your billing, but it so depends on how much money actually comes in. And especially with the road accident fund, and we're still doing some medico-legal work, so trying to get that money in on settlements, and so it is complicated. The billing
wasn't easy,
no,
by any means. I mean, we both had other sources of income at the time when we started practice. So our auntie, the main fee, has her own sources of income, and so it was by no means easy. We really took a financial knock, but we were also kind of of the opinion we had already taken a financial knock during COVID, and so we were struggling actually for a while financially. And so we're just like, you know what, we're here now, let's put what we can into the business. I took out a loan, and we a loan from my folks, but and
still a loan is still a loan.
And I continued locoming, working my bum off, working ridiculous hours. So it's I don't know if there's an easier way to do it. If there is, please will let us know. But so it's tough financially.
But what I'm hearing you say is that you kind of have to go into it with that open eyes to know that it's going to be tough. And like you said, because you had already gone through COVID, it's kind of like COVID was almost like your university of struggling financially, to know that you can actually do it, right? You can get through the difficult financial times. But what I'm also hearing you say is that you had to be open to know that revenue does not equal cash flow and profit, right? And I think that's the mistake, and even if you're not in the health profession, that's the mistake most people do when they go into business, is that they chase revenue goals, but they don't remember that they need to take into account how cash flow is going to affect the life of their business. And then also whether you might have great cash flow, but you might not be profitable. It's great that I also hear you say that you did use professionals like the tax consultants. So many practice owners are trying to do everything on their own, and the things that they're trying to do on their own are things that are definitely not in their expertise, like trying to do their own accounting, like trying to, if you know how to do billing because you've maybe worked the system before in a practice, then so be it. But if you don't know what you're doing, maybe it is better to outsource that kind of thing, or get legal advice if you need to drop contracts and things.
So I've done that always all along, because I've always, I do a little bit of billing for other practices on the side, actually. So that's kind of been my side little hustle. So we just kind of felt like it would be a bit silly to pay someone to do the grunt work at this stage. But I definitely could not have done it without the support of I think that's why this other accounting guy hit us quite hard, because it's even just from a supportive point of view. But anyway, we found someone now, and I definitely couldn't have done it without him, because it also just gives you I don't know what I don't know. So like someone else can just come with a different angle and track things differently, or give advice on something, which it helps so much having that. I totally agree with you.
But the adverse is also true. Exactly like he just said. I was kind of a bit happy-go-lucky. He's got financial experience. We've got this accountant. I'll just go do the fun stuff and the marketing. And then when all of this happened with our accountants, I was clueless. I didn't know what was happening. And so it's still a goal of mine to actually do a little tax course or something, so that when the accountants are speaking their fancy language to me, I can actually understand it and make an informed decision for myself. So I think the support is important, but you also have to have a handle on it, which is what's so hard. Is we are OTs. That's not exactly what we want to be doing, but we actually have to.
No, absolutely. You touched on something really important there, is that at the end of the day, it's your business and you're still accountable, even if the accountant is doing the books. So nobody's asking you to go and get a tax degree, but you should at least know basics of understanding the books. What is a balance sheet? What is an income statement? And I think if you get a good accountant, their role should be to support you in educating you and telling you, this is what this means and advising you in that way. So, definitely an important point that you made there. But now, following on the topic about money, is that money comes from clients, right? So tell me a little bit about that, because that seems to be always the thing that people most focus on. Is like, how do I get more clients? How do I get more clients? So tell me a bit about that. What did you find was the biggest barriers and the biggest successes in terms of building your practice client base?
So the biggest thing is you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to actually just get your name out there as much as possible. So this is Kirsten's. So I do more of the invoicing and the billing. Kirsten does more of the marketing, but it is very much putting yourself out there, getting your name known, and building relationships. We've particularly seen the benefit of building relationships with the doctors. So especially when you need an FCE or return to work screening, like the doctors, there is kind of like a bit of a niche there. So like just to say, hey, we're here, this is what we do. And actually, but that weight of that responsibility is quite big, because you, like I said in the beginning, you're always wanting to keep your name positive. So it's constant communication, sending reports, getting feedback, that type of thing. So Kirsten has done very well on that, I think. In particular, Kirsten's done well on that in building that relationship with the doctors. And I think just also it comes a bit from her clinical experience as well. So she was introduced to some of those doctors, and so it kind of took off from there. We did do some cold calling, literally. It's horrible. I can't say that was hugely beneficial. We might have got maybe a little bit into the insurance companies, a little bit like that. But it's actually, and then it's website and social media.
Yeah.
So a lot of our stuff comes from that as well.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of been from the start, and I think if I can almost draw on what I've seen some of my friends and my colleagues doing, is from day one, we've kind of been of the opinion that you need money to make money. We actually need to spend money to make this money and to create an image for our business that is professional. And so from the start, we've actually paid a website hosting company that does SEO and things like that. And that really has, even the social media side, although that's by no means our forte, we still try to get the hang of that and learn how to work with a social media agency and all of that to create the image that we want. And with the right targets, I think, you'll know this, Tasneem, social media can be used for different things. And when they ask me, I'm like, to create a presence and a professional image for our business. That's really what it's about. So I think we've got a lot of that stuff kind of running in the background, but it means that people are actually finding us sometimes without us putting time and time. So I think that's one of the biggest bits of advice I would actually give, is to actually spend that money on a proper website, on a bit of SEO. It always pays for itself. I don't think there's been a single month where our SEO and whatever hasn't at least paid for itself, if not more. So that's a big thing that we do. And then it's just the ongoing relationship building. We are constantly, that doesn't change. It was harder in the beginning. We had to put ourselves out there more in the beginning. But even now, if a doctor hasn't necessarily made contact, hasn't necessarily asked for a report, we send that report. We ask for an opinion. We try and work with people, because every little contact that you make, physio that you talk to, speechy that you talk to, it's connections that you're making. And that's what it's about. I think we've learned that it's also about who you know, and it's about knowing other OTs involved, actually. Because it's not always a doctor. A lot of the time it's OTs that are like, oh no, I'm not the right person. On our website we get peds inquiries, hands inquiries, all sorts. And it's the OTs that know how to direct to the right OT. And so we also really value our relationships with other OTs that we can inter-refer. There's stuff that's not appropriate for us that we need to refer as well. So knowing other OTs, knowing other people in your industry, I think has also been hugely beneficial for us.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there about, the fact that your paid marketing efforts doesn't take time, because I think people forget that, when they're trying to save money by doing everything themselves, that time is money. So the time that you are spending on tinkering with trying to learn how to make your own website is time that you could have been spending with a client that you can bill. So it's kind of looking at, unless you really love it and your secret hidden like talent is that you like learning how to code or do websites or whatever, then by all means, because you're doing a hobby at the same time, but is it really the most efficient and effective use of your time? So having that mindset that you are investing in your business rather than you are spending money, and then investing it in the ways that is going to bring more money in, rather than, something frivolous that's not going to generate revenue, I think is something that people can really learn from what you're sharing there. So that's amazing advice. But I think a lot of people struggle with like you mentioned, like building relationships, right? And although cold calling itself didn't work, the relationship bit and the networking bit, and Kirsten, Fiona was saying that you've been done quite well in that area. So what tips would you give when people want to kind of reach out to doctors or, say, here I am? What is the best way to kind of build that relationship and let them know who you are and get to trust that they can refer their patients or their cases to you?
Sure. It's a tough one, Tasneem, just because I do think the people stuff comes somewhat naturally to me. But I think one of the biggest things, and something that I actually learned from a physio that we've worked with, is what is the benefit to them? What would make, the doctor's life easiest or the insurer's life easiest? What are they actually gaining from this? Because sometimes I think we feel like we're nagging. We feel like we're a bit of a pain. But actually, we have really valuable information to offer them, and we can make, especially doctors' lives, a lot easier. And so I think it's about that. I think it's about being considerate in your communication. Just phoning a doctor is highly inconsiderate. And they are seeing patients and you're seeing patients all day. So just small things like that, and actually considering what does their day look like? When would be good for them? What would they want out of this? Is this really necessary communication, or is this, for me to get my foot in the door? So I think in terms of that actual building of relationships, as much as sometimes, yes, we need to put ourselves out there and just say, hey, I'm here, that's different to actually building a relationship. I think the building the relationship part is really that consideration and that kind of mutual benefit.
And I also liked what you said about having a network of other OTs, because this is like something that I'm always on my soapbox about, is that there tends to be a lot of competitiveness within professions and between professions, when actually we're stronger together when we actually collaborate rather than compete against each other, because we uplift then the image of the profession, but we also then, it becomes that relationship building. I've referred many people to other OTs because I don't work with that kind of area of expertise, and I don't expect anything in return. But knowing that is going, if I make the right referral and the person's problem gets solved, then they're going to think, wow, OTs are amazing. And then they're going to tell other people, and that might not come back to me, but it grows the profession, which is going to be good for me anyway, because I'm an OT. So I just love that you have that attitude. Yeah. So I want to end off with talking about first of all, what are you most proud of with your journey to date? And then secondly, if you could go back in time to your younger self, what advice would you give? Or although you didn't start the practice so long ago, if you went back in time when you first had that conversation of, we're going to do this, what advice would you give yourself?
So I think Chris can jump in here as well. I think, so what we're proud of, I think we're proud that the practice has come this far. with a lot of obstacles along the way, and we've actually come this far. And I think, like what Chris has been saying, we've built relationships. And so I feel like we give our patients the very best that we can. If we're not sure, we'll collaborate, we'll talk through issues, we'll ask Megan, we'll get reports checked, we are actually, we try and give absolute best that we can to our clients, which comes at a little bit of a cost sometimes, because I feel like I eat, dream, breathe my clients. But I am proud of that. I think that we've done very well on that front. Do you want to go in before I add anything more?
Yeah, and I think also I feel very proud about, actually our financial management. So although it's been hard, we haven't taken out huge loans. We're not owing money. Our books actually, as much as we're not taking an enormous salary, we are in a really financially good space considering how young our business is. And I think that's something to be proud of, because it just gives us such a springboard for the future. We're okay, and we're going to be. Our trajectory is consistently, looking good. So I think it's really something to be proud of as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then what I would give my younger self advice: lower your expectations when you start a business. I think especially for me, having I had run a practice before, but it was just me. I was a sole prop. So it was very different. So I think the VOC rehab space is a little bit more, we kind of feel like we've got a lot of different divisions, if I can put it that way. And so you've got to kind of get your head around all the different divisions. And so I think from that point of view, like the registrations and even the admin, it just took a lot to get around. So that's why I say, I think lower your expectations, give yourself maybe a longer time frame to get things done. I think, so lower my expectations. That would be to my younger self.
I think to my younger self, I would say take care of yourself. I've been a very young, ambitious, career-driven individual. And so I've just kind of been of the opinion, like, work hard, set the foundations, and I'll be okay later. But you actually also need to be okay now. There's certain things I have kind of sacrificed of myself. The small stuff, exercise, mental health, taking proper leisure breaks and things like that you almost sacrifice for the sake of the business. But the reality is then when you crash and burn, the business stops running. And so I think really just it's become such a focus for me, is to prioritize me, because we are a business, and so we need to prioritize ourselves as well.
Yeah, I think on that, just time management is really important. So we've actually learned to structure our weeks that we actually have admin time, that it's not just client time. And it's hard, because you want the more clients you obviously have, the better the practice is going to do. But like I said, if you don't actually put that time frame in, you actually just land up working. You'll just land up working like most evenings, weekends, to catch up the admin part. And reports are a big part of what we do. Yes. So we actually need to put time aside to write reports, that it's not done as a secondary part of the day, it's a priority. And so you need to prioritize that time. So time management has been absolutely critical. And I think we're not there yet, but we've learned a lot on how to time management as we've gone along.
So where to next for your practice? I mean, like you said, your practice is fairly new, but it's growing consistently. You're very proud of where you are in terms of how it's grown. So what's the next stage?
Encourage someone. We currently have a volunteer from Zoom who's helping us out, but I think in the near future we're hoping to have some extra hands just to help with the OT side of things, so that we have the time to be business owners.
I think that's the thing. It's like with OTs, we can only charge time. And so there's a maximum amount that you can charge. And so, yeah, that's, and it's a tricky one. We talk about it all the time because, like, when is the right time to employ someone? But yeah, that's kind of where we see to kind of do more of the same, but just maybe get some help from someone.
I think we both loving what we're doing. Well, I know I am very, very passionate, so I'm very proud of where the practice is at, and I kind of just I think we want to ride it out and see where it goes. But I think the next kind of short/medium term goal or step there is probably getting some extra hands to allow us to actually grow the business as well.
Awesome, amazing. So thank you so much for sharing, being so open and honest and vulnerable about your experience and your journey. If there are anyone listening who would like to refer or find out more about what you do, where do they reach you? Where are you based? All of that good stuff.
All right. So we're based in Randpark Ridge in Joburg. And yeah, our website is www.br-ot.co.za. But also happy to share the links to our website and social media with you. That's probably the best spot. We try to be as responsive as possible to contact requests and things like that. So yeah, those are probably the best spots to find us.
Okay, cool. And I will definitely put all those links in the description box in the video below as well, so people can just reach you there and follow you on social media. And